Hello everyone! As a heads up, this episode has been divided into 2 parts. You are now listening to part 2. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, please go back and do so before continuing forward. We hope you enjoy.
So amazingly, you go through all of this drama in the book and then realize you're only 2/3 of the way done.
Yep, and you're like, wow, what else is going to happen?
What is going to happen?
And the answer is honestly not a lot. But it's a lot of internal Coriolanus figuring things out after
this is where
what's
we see
happened.
Huge changes in his character.
The rest of it is definitely much more psychological than the first couple
and
parts. Whiny. Yes, and whiny. Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe
so
that's what I should blame it on. As soon as things get whiny, that's when you lose me. I bet that's the real problem.
And I think sometimes too, when like a book has the final part where you're like, this is like 150 pages that I didn't really like out of this whole book, and that's what you're left with.
Right.
Like that's the last thing you have. You're like, did that just ruin my whole other experience? Yeah. And sometimes it kind of does.
150 pages is a lot of time to ruin an experience. Yeah, for sure.
So I will say I do think the first 2 parts are the most interesting, and if it was all more like that, I think I would like things a little bit better. I still gave it 5 stars out of 5 stars. So I still really ended up really liking it, like I said, but I think it does have an impact on my enjoyment level, especially the first time I read it, because I was like, whoa, it's been so exciting, harder. And then it's like not really that harder. Exciting. Yeah. Anyway, but how we get there. Yeah. Let's talk about how we get there.
It is dramatic and exciting how we get there, I think.
Yes, Lucy Gray ends up winning, like we said, and then Coriolanus is called to Dean Highbottom, and he's like, oh, I'm going to get the award. I am off to the races with my life. It's going to be great. We can probably figure out a way to have Lucy Gray stay here.
He won the girl. He won the prize. He won a future.
He did it. And then basically it just talks about him talking to Dean Highbottom for about 5 minutes and then leaving and immediately going to register as a peacekeeper. And the reason is he mentions that Dean Highbottom has the handkerchief and his mother's like makeup thing. I can't remember what it's called. Like a compact. We didn't talk about that, but basically it was this compact that his mother had for makeup, and he takes the makeup out and has Lucy Gray put in some rat poison that she had.
And that's how she's killing people.
And that's how she's been poisoning and killing people. Yeah, when she has killed people, which I think she only really kills.
I think it's only 2.
2 that way, and then 1 with the snake.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
So she ended up killing 3 people with poison, technically, but 2 people with the rat poison.
That is interesting. The 3rd one is also with poison. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that.
All the way around. That is her weapon of choice, apparently.
Not just her.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, so Dean Highbottom finds these items, and he knows, and so he basically says, you're not getting the award. We'll let you go quietly with as little drama as possible, but you need to just register as a peacekeeper. You're going to be banished for like 20 years, basically, and you're not going to get a degree, and that's it. You're gone, and we're getting rid of you.
And Coriolanus really, he doesn't have another choice.
Yeah.
He just has to agree.
There's nothing else he can do. There's just a few lines and stuff in the movies that I love. And one I like here is when he's like, do you hear that, boy? Oh, it's the sound of snow falling. And
he says that at some point in the book too.
I think so, because I recognized it, but it wasn't the same time. Okay. But I feel like in that scene it was really good. Yeah. I feel like that scene was particularly great in the film to do that. And I like that he says, and finally, because we don't know exactly why he's saying finally yet.
That's probably our first
until
hint,
later. But knowing it, you're like,
thing.
Yes. Knowing it, though, you're like, oh, wow, he's been waiting for a long time to get this vengeance for something that is honestly really interesting that he feels a need to get vengeance on in some ways.
I would argue that he's a little over dramatic about it. But...
I can never be in favor of someone who punishes the children for the sins of the parents.
100%.
So I really don't like that about him, but I do appreciate the fact that he hates what his drunk idea has caused to happen.
Fair.
And that's what he's mad about.
And that's what he's...
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you can, I mean, I agree that Coriolanus hasn't done anything and therefore doesn't deserve punishment, but it is interesting that he, like, sees the same qualities in Coriolanus that stress him out, where he's like, and then he's actively watching Coriolanus making the games into what the government wants and making them worse. Mm-hmm. So he is kind of seeing things that justify him a little bit in wanting to break down Coriolanus'
It's not just revenge. It's also a sense of trying to undo his own mistakes.
Yeah, and prevent
Coriolanus
it from getting worse.
Is getting in the way of that.
Yeah, yeah. So there is kind of, like, that does make it a little bit better for me. That it's not just solely, I'm going to destroy your life because of your dad.
I agree. So part 3, and we have Coriolanus as a peacekeeper now, and he's miserable. He hates it. He hates that this is where his life has taken him. He's upset because his grandmam and Tigress will probably be evicted from their home, and obviously just feels guilty about that and just frustrated by that. But surprise, surprise, Sejanus shows up in his room, and Sejanus ended up registering to be a peacekeeper as well, and they both asked to go to 12 so that Coriolanus can see Lucy Gray. And they go out there together, and they're getting to know each other. They're working as a team. He doesn't meet Lucy Gray for a little bit after he's arrived in District 12. There's just...
I think it's the first weekend, isn't it? I think it's that very first weekend that they're like, we're going to go to the Hob. There's a band playing. Somebody named, like, Lucy something or other. And I was like... Wow. Okay, talk about a freaking miracle.
Super
this man
fast,
shows up in 12. He doesn't even have to try. Lucy's just there.
Blessing for him.
Yes.
So, yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, sort of. But before that, I nearly forgot. Before that, we do have the hanging.
And something actually right when Sejanus shows up, I actually think this is a big deal. Sejanus made this kind of deal with his father and the academy. I don't remember the specifics exactly, but, like, he arranged things so that, and his father helped arrange things so that he could leave and get his diploma, but he argues for Coriolanus to get his diploma as well. Because Dean Highbottom kicked him out without a diploma, which erases his future. Without an academy diploma, he can never get into the university. He can never progress in any way, anywhere. He's just stuck as a grunt for the rest of his life. But Sejanus, as part of his deal, gets Coriolanus' diploma as well because of this perceived friendship between them. And that's, like, literally what allows Coriolanus to have any hope in his future.
Yes.
As a peacekeeper. Blessing. And after he gets out of the peacekeepers, like, in both situations, that's the reason that he has any hope in his future. And so just Sejanus' friendship and dedication to him, and the fact that he's able to get that.
Yeah, and
huge.
Coriolanus, like, is grateful in the moment, but he ends up just taking it for granted.
Oh, 100%.
All of this stuff he just takes for granted.
100%.
And forgets the miracles, that allow
Sejanus
him to
does
get there.
so much for him, and he just, like, sees him as this nuisance.
Yes.
And then worse.
It's so sad. And I think maybe a small part of him ends up regretting that a little bit, but it's pretty fleeting.
I think that's possible.
I would say, yeah.
Okay, then the hanging.
Yes, then the hanging. So we see the actual scene that inspires the song, The Hanging Tree, which we hear
you
in
didn't see that
Mockingjay.
coming.
Yes, crazy. So we have this scene, and Coriolanus and Sejanus are acting as guardsmen, and there's this man who's being hung for
setting off an explosion.
Yes, that killed three peacekeepers. I think that sounds right.
Something
to me.
like
that.
Something
along those lines.
3, though. 3 people died.
Specifically 3, just like it says in the song. So he supposedly killed 3 people, and so they are hanging him, and there's this woman in the crowd who's like, no, let him go, he's innocent, yelling, trying to get to him, and he ends up telling her to run, like, don't stay here, run, and then he gets hung.
As his last words,
those are his last words, and there's a bunch of jabberjays around, and so they just repeat his last words over and over, and so it's this really haunting,
I felt like they did
moment.
Such a good job of that in the movie.
They did.
I feel like it's something that
well.
could be seen very comical, like it could come across very comically when portrayed like that, but it was so haunting and creepy and well done.
Just the over and over. Yeah. I remember I listened to the audiobook this time around for most of the book, and the narrator that was doing it, the way he did it, when it would come on, it like scared the heck out of me. So I was really hoping they do well in the movie, because I was like, this is so,
it was so scary.
I'm like, I'm just imagining that like over and over and over, just echoing and off rhythm from each other, different birds saying it and stuff. I'm like, that is so scary.
And they did it.
Yes,
amazing.
They did a great job. And then like the shot where they have like the dead tree and like all the birds flying around it doing it.
Yeah.
It was very well done. So that all happens, and then we have him go and see Lucy Gray singing, and they meet up, and it's really exciting for both of them. Yay. Not going to spend too much time on that because there's not really a lot to focus on, besides the fact that that they found each other so quickly was a miracle, and that both of them are still willing to interact with each other after the trauma.
You do have characterization in the sense that he sees more of the natural man, I think, because he doesn't actually meet up with Lucy that first weekend because the fight breaks out. Remember?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And so, and he talks about how like during the daytime at the hanging, he was worried about the restless crowd, but they didn't do anything. But then as soon as it was nighttime and no one was watching them and they were in shadow, this huge fight broke out and everybody freaked out and are throwing random punches. So it kind of like, we see that like solidification of his like view of humanity and their violent tendencies as soon as they're not under capital control.
A couple different things happen throughout most of this part. It's focused both on time with Lucy Gray and kind of getting to know her a little bit more, but also on this situation where they're gathering jabberjays, but also there's mockingjays as well that I think they want to study a little bit.
They're supposed to be gathering 50 of each. Yeah,
that's right.
But the mockingjays are proving harder to catch.
Information, yes, and that really irritates Coriolanus. He develops a hatred for the mockingjays very fast, which Cariana and I talked about and felt like it was a little bit like on the nose about it.
I don't like the super obvious references to like, everything about Coriolanus is just built to hate Katniss.
Yes, I think in the film that was one thing they changed that made more sense. Better. Yeah, that worked better for me as far as his developing hatred for the mockingjays.
But it is developed and it is justified. There are reasons for it. It's just like really extreme, really fast.
Yes, yeah,
for no apparent reason. But it's okay.
I'm like, you could come up with all sorts of arguments. I still don't feel like I like it, but I'm like, a part of it could be just like he just has a lot of pent up anger and he's just directing them at the mockingjays to start with, and then it develops more just association more than anything. But anyway, either way, they're gathering these mockingjays and jabberjays, and these become really important later on as well. But he does develop this hatred for the mockingjays, and he does have an interest in how the jabberjays work. So he does ask. He thinks they're interesting, and so he asks like how they work, and he's also just trying to get a good in with Dr. Gall, and Dr. Gall's not there, but some of her scientists are there who worked with the Jabberjays originally, and he still wants to look good, so he's asking questions and pulling out his society talk and trying to charm them, developing connections. The scientists. So that's what he's doing, but it does get him some more information that comes into play in a little bit. Also during this time, he ends up taking an officer test to see if he could possibly move up in the ranks. And he's like, well, if I can't go to the university, then I may as well try to rise up in the ranks as a peacekeeper. And that's another way I can reach my goals. It's actually really cute. I like it. A, he's allowed to take the officer test because he has his diploma. Yes. And B, I think it's cute that because his father is a renowned military general, right? Who gets a lot of respect. And so he actually gets kind of excited about the whole officer thing. Yeah, it's true. He's willing to say like, this part of my life is over, but here's an opportunity to do something over here, and I can grow in the ranks and become like my father and have power and respect, and so I really like actually the fact that he's like willing to try to turn his life in that way and make something good with what he's been given. He's definitely very proactive. Yeah. And I feel like it's interesting thinking about the interaction between proactivity and expecting miracles. Because, I mean, expectation is a little bit of proactivity.
And seeking.
Yeah,
seeking and expecting
absolutely,
miracles.
even more so.
Yeah.
And so the fact that he is proactive is a really positive thing if he was proactive in recognizing the miracles and utilizing the miracles the way they should be. But he is proactive in a way where he like takes these blessings and miracles and manipulates them instead of using them the way they should be used. And he seeks his own miracles.
Yeah. Like he 100% does that. Yes. He just gives himself the credit for them.
Yeah. He puts no credit on God. And he also doesn't put credit on other people, even if he doesn't believe in God. Like, he has no gratitude. There's zero gratitude. And I think a huge part of seeking and expecting miracles is being able to have gratitude for them, to make them as effective as they could be.
Yeah, to recognize them as something outside of your own power to be grateful for.
Because that makes you want to be proactive in the right way, in a way that faces God, faces the person who gave it to you when you have gratitude. If you don't have gratitude, then of course you're going to kind of manipulate the situation. If you are proactive in general, then yeah. I wanted to bring a little bit of scripture into that actually. Please. Because I read... In preparation for this, I read the talk given by Elder Dieter F. Uchtdorf in this very recent general conference. It's called The Prodigal and the Road That Leads Home, and it's really primarily about the prodigal son story, and he's kind of exploring different aspects of it throughout his talk. It was interesting reading it with the perspective of this book and what we were talking about with expecting miracles, because a lot of it he talks about how the son, he wants to get the inheritance now, and he sees it as a way to be free from the principles and rules of the culture of his youth. He could finally make his own choices without being influenced by his parents, and there's no more guilt. That's what he's looking for. And so he's expecting this miracle, this blessing of his inheritance to come now, so at the wrong time, and he's expecting to just use it however he wants for his own benefit. And I think when we're expecting miracles, it can be easy to fall into that, where we're like, I want it now, even if it's the wrong time. Like, God knows the right timing for miracles. And so it could be the wrong time, and it could be that we're not going to use those blessings and miracles the way God wants us to because of the timing, in part as well. And I think with Coriolanus Snow, he wants the miracles now. He wants to just get to university. And so that's what makes him not as grateful when the miracles do come, because these miracles are coming, but they're not happening as fast as he wants them to, and they're not happening exactly the way he wants them to. And so that makes him upset. And so when they do still come, he's more focused on that than he is on the gratitude. And then, like we've been saying, he uses them for the wrong ends. He's using them like this inheritance was given to him by his father. It was something his father wanted to give to him. He just wasn't going to give it to him then, and he was hoping he would use it for a positive thing, but he doesn't. The prodigal son doesn't. And that's really the same with Coriolanus Snow. He's not using it the way his Father in heaven intended, or getting at the time that he intended.
Yeah, I feel like President Nelson, like, kind of in just one sentence in that talk, The Power of Spiritual Momentum, he says each of these miracles, he's talking about different miracles in the scriptures, and says each of these miracles took time and may not have been exactly what those individuals originally requested from the Lord. Yeah. The Lord works in his own time and in his own ways, and it's really easy to... I like what you're saying in that, like, Coriolanus struggles with being grateful because he's not getting what he requested when he requests it, and it's coming in these kind of roundabout ways that are taking longer. It makes me want to think about, like, am I less grateful for miracles that come after when I really wanted them to come? Yeah. And I think I can think of a couple of examples where I am. I actually just today, that's so interesting, I took like 5 minutes today during work. It was slow and nothing was going on, and I thought, I'm going to pray a prayer of gratitude and nothing else. I'm just going to take 5 minutes and just feel grateful. And there's a larger context behind that for why I decided to do that. But that's what I decided to do. And one thing that I specifically brought up was my education, because I'm really, really grateful for my education. But you know very well that lately have not been because I really just want it to be over. And so I've spent a really long time in college and I'm just really tired of being there. And so it's really easy for me to be like, I hate school. I don't care about my graduation. I don't care. I want it to be over. I don't care if I fail this last class I'm in. I'm just going to take what I have and go. And I'm sick of it and I'm done. And so I'm actually like now feeling kind of proud of myself.
Way to go.
That I took the time and was like, Heavenly Father, I know that I've been struggling and I know that this has been hard for me, but I really am grateful for what my education has done for me and the fact that I have it. So I think that's one really poignant example to me of a place where I have not been grateful for what I have because of just kind of the timing and the way it's gone in a direction that I haven't
not quite
necessarily wanted. Yeah. And so I could probably think of other examples too, but that gives me something to ponder that I appreciate.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I liked it too when I was researching that because I think it's so easy for me, and I think this is something it's going to take me longer than just this study to really infiltrate in my brain, but understanding that God's timing is the right timing for things.
Yes.
It's so easy to be like, oh, it's the Lord's timing, and you're like, oh, why is it then?
Why God's
and stuff
timing?
like, and I think sometimes we're just like, oh, he's just testing me by making me wait. Where it's like maybe it's just really there's a lot of reasons why it can't happen right now.
It's such a painful
I
point,
know.
Tori.
I hate that. That's why I said it's gonna take me a long time to get this to like really like settle into my brain.
But it's right. It's not just like what he wants.
Yeah.
It's actually like resolutely
when it's
correct.
supposed to happen.
Yes.
Like it's the thing that's gonna be like, this is the timing that is going to be the best, most successful timing for it.
Literally for you.
Yes. Literally for you. And yeah, because I think with Coriolanus, like going back to the story, a lot of this stuff gets in his way and stuff, and these miracles just kind of keep him going. And to him, he's like, why couldn't I have just gotten this faster? But in a lot of ways, it's allowing him these multiple opportunities to choose which path he's going to go on.
Yeah.
That's what the miracles and their timing is causing for him, is allowing him these chances to come unto Christ if he so chooses.
Yeah.
He just doesn't.
Right.
And that's really sad. But that's what those miracles are allowing for him, is opportunity.
No, during this summer that he spends as a peacekeeper, he has this amazing experience that he's never had before with the opportunity to see the districts. He's never seen the districts before. He has the chance to see that they're just people like him. They go out, they get drunk together, they party, they have a good time. Like, they're just like him and his friends, you know? And he even, part of his squad is from the district. So he has this really, really close personal contact with lots of people from the districts. He gets the chance to explore nature. He's lived in this city, and suddenly he gets to be in God's creation and swim in a lake and dig in the dirt. And that doesn't have to be his favorite thing, but he gets the chance to have so many different experiences that could help him respect people and humanity and God better. And instead he just goes the opposite direction and
again chooses to focus on the negative
on
things.
The negative. Yes, because there is negative. There is negative.
There
really
always is.
Yeah,
that's like the point of this life, is
Yeah.
that there's good and evil in this
Right.
life. So
but yeah, he decides to take those experiences, look at the bad parts of them, and say and go down a dark path with it.
Which brings us into our next really big moment, which is when there's kind of two different scenes, but they both come together in a sense of getting to know things about Sejanus that really impact Coriolanus. So the first one, Coriolanus realizes that Sejanus isn't telling him the truth about everything. So he's noticed Sejanus talking to some of the men in the district, and he's kind of questioning that because he knows Sejanus is very sensitive to the district's plight. And he also ends up finding money in Sejanus's stuff that his father must have given him, and he's acting like he doesn't have any money. And so he's like, what are you using this money for? Why are
catches him in a
you
lie.
lying about that? And he ends up having this conversation with Sejanus about it, and Sejanus admits that he's actually helping the rebels within the district to save the woman who earlier during the hanging tree scene was the one calling out to the man being hung, and then she ends up getting thrown in prison. And so their goal is to break her out and run away, and have several of them run away from the district. And Sejanus, like I said, is helping them do this, and they're working on getting some of the Jabberjays together during this. And Coriolanus notices this, and like I said, he's been taught by one of the scientists how the Jabberjays work, how you're able to get them to record and then play that later on. And so he ends up sneakily getting one of the remotes and having one of the Jabberjays record their conversation. And it's like I said, Sejanus is admitting that he's basically rebelling against the capital. And Coriolanus decides, he has this moment where he's like, am I actually going to do this? I could just delete this recording right now and we don't even need to worry about it. But he ends up sending it to Dr. Gall, and knowing that she's probably going to listen to it and they'll find out and stop it. And so we end there, and then we go to a performance by Lucy Gray. I should say we learned that she's part of the Covey, which is basically a group of traveling performers. At least they were a group of traveling performers before the war, and then with the way the capital has things set up, everybody's just isolated in their own districts. And so these kind of more nomadic people have been shoved into whatever district they were closest to, I'm assuming. And so for Lucy Gray and her part of the Covey, that is in District 12, and that's why she's there, even though she doesn't really see herself as a part of District 12. So they are performing, and that's what Coriolanus has been going to see her in a lot. That's where he first sees her, and everything is in this kind of, it's in the Hob, I think, which
we know about.
Yes,
the
which
black
is in,
market where Katniss
mm-hmm.
sells things.
Yeah, so they're in there and they're performing, and the peacekeepers come and stuff. And while she's singing, Coriolanus notices that Sejanus has left, and so then he sees him walking down this other like hall or something, and so he ends up following him, only to catch him in this secret little room with some district men who have a bunch of weapons, and there's actually a man that comes up behind him with a gun pointed at him, and Sejanus is trying to be like, oh no, he's with me, it's fine, but then Lucy Gray, she's finished her performance and saw Coriolanus go in there, and so she ends up following him and is also in there with him, and they're both getting this gun pointed at them. One thing leads to another. Basically, it's Billy Taupe, who was Lucy Gray's previous boyfriend, who betrayed her with Mayfair, the mayor's daughter, and had all that drama that caused her to get into the Hunger Games in the first place. And so Mayfair is actually there as well and makes comments, and she basically is threatening to turn them in.
Which is pretty stupid.
Yes, super stupid when they have guns, literally, like, girl,
bunch of desperate people with weapons. It's
dumb.
Pretty idiotic.
Anyway, but she's like, I'm gonna turn you into my dad, and then Coriolanus is like, no you're not, and so he takes the gun and shoots her.
Literally shoots her.
She's
her
dead. She's dead.
Mayor's daughter dead.
Yes. And so then Billy Taupe is like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And then he's like, oh, I'm going to take you guys down with me with all of this, you're gonna die too. And so then this other guy who is kind of his co-operative within this rebel plan ends up shooting him because he was threatening to expose them as well. So we have two dead bodies there now. And so Coriolanus is like, Lucy Gray, you go perform, and we're going to deal with this. The guy, I wish I could remember his name. Spruce, thank you. I was like, I know it starts with an S. Spruce is the one who shoots Billy Taupe, and he's like, I'll take these guns, and I'm gonna go hide them so that nobody can trace it back to us, and we just need to stay cool. So they're having Lucy Gray perform, and then having Coriolanus and Sejanus get out of there so that they have an alibi for the whole situation, and then they're gonna take the bodies somewhere else. So they do all of this, and it seems like they might have gotten away with it, but Sejanus is not very good under the pressure. Obviously, he has this very strong moral compass, and so he's just breaking over, keeping this secret. And then the peacekeepers, they do find the bodies, and the peacekeepers are out looking for whoever did it, trying to find evidence, and they end up taking Spruce in. And so they're getting really nervous, like, oh, if they torture him, is he gonna tell them anything about us, and all that jazz? Well, well. I don't think it makes it very clear whether he did say anything about Sejanus or not, but we know that Coriolanus did. And Sejanus does get arrested for conspiring with the district rebel leaders. And so they have another hanging, and Sejanus is one of the people being hung. And Coriolanus is just really struggling because he knows he sent that Jabberjay, and that's probably what really brought Sejanus specifically down. And it's a really sad, back to the Jabberjays and their creepy little
oh my gosh,
repetition. It's really sad.
It's brutal.
Because he calls out for his mom is his last word.
Just calls out Ma.
Yeah, Ma.
The Jabberjays are repeating Ma
over and over and over again in his same voice. Yeah, which is the other thing. It's like they record in the same voice and tones and stuff. It's not like just the words. So,
and that might also be part of why I was weirded out by the fact that Coriolanus hated the Mockingjays so bad, but then liked the Jabberjays so much. Because I liked your point that, like, one is capital and one is kind of this, like, intermixing that he thinks is inappropriate, you know, and he likes the capital and he doesn't like the kind of the corruption of it. But, like, he has these traumatic events connected with the Jabberjays.
Specifically, especially up to this point.
Yeah, I'm like, what the crap, dude? Why do you like these Jabberjays so much? Like, he's horrified by them. He doesn't like he doesn't like the words. He doesn't like the creepiness of it. And I'm like, I feel like we're kind of casually ignoring, like, these events that should be affecting him more.
Yeah.
But it's fine.
Yeah,
it's
I agree.
Fine. It really
it's fine.
is.
Although I will say with the Jabberjays, he's interested in them, but I don't ever get the feeling he loves them. He's just like they're a tool to him more than anything.
Okay.
But I think it does connect back, I mean, not just to the capital itself, but to the control versus chaos. Whereas the Jabberjays have more control because it's like you record, they say it. Like, it's just one A to B, whereas the Mockingjays are, like, musical. They're still, like, more like birds, but they still have, like, incorporate this repetition. And so I think that symbolically, I don't know. I think there's probably a lot of things, but anyway.
But then with the Jabberjays, it's still, because I can agree, like, you can hit record, they record, you play, they play, right? That kind of level of control. But when they're not in record mode, they just pick up whatever they want, which is what they're doing at the hanging tree, right? And so it's this, like, chaos of, like, them choosing what to say and then all of them saying it at the same time. And it's, like, chaotic and frantic and nobody has any control over it. So that was, I thought about that briefly, but then I was like, but even that still kind of goes against that core principle.
It's true.
But I agree that there's never, like, a love for them, I suppose. It's just an interest.
Yeah,
so
just
that's
in how they work.
And he likes that they break up the monotony of his routine, taking care of his
Oh, that was the thing I was going to say, was he is more able to get used to things that he feels are useful. And Jabberjays are useful, Mockingjays aren't.
Yeah.
And so Mockingjays are just, they repeat just like Jabberjays, not just like Jabberjays, but, you know, in the same realm.
Right.
But you can't use them. Yeah, it's useless chaos.
And at the same time, a corruption of the capital.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a lot of things.
Yeah.
Again, I think the extremity of his emotions
extreme,
is a little ridiculous.
We should
especially at the point where he has it.
Yes. And then especially combined with the fact that he doesn't have any kind of similar reaction to the Jabberjays. I'm like,
yeah,
whatever.
Like, okay, if that's the way you feel.
Yeah. It sounds like, when I talk about it, it sounds like it bothers me more than it does. It's just one thing where I'm like, what?
Yeah, a little silly.
Yeah.
A little silly. So Sejanus is dead.
Sejanus is dead.
And we have
Coriolanus has not been ratted out.
Yeah,
which
he
is
hasn't.
Crazy.
But he's also paranoid. He's like,
super
it could happen
stressed.
anytime, basically.
And he's expecting
he'll get off.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we also have him talk to Lucy Gray, who Lucy Gray is being stalked by the mayor because the mayor thinks that she did it just because of the past with Mayfield and Billy Tope and her. So she's like, I'm going to get killed by this mayor no matter what. Like, I just am. And she's still partway in the games. In the book, it doesn't make it it doesn't like say it out loud, but you can tell, like, when someone steps up behind her, she like jumps really aggressively, and she's very much in survivor mode and traumatized from the games, like everybody else gets traumatized by the games. And in the movie, she actually says, "I still have one foot in the games." So the fact that the mayor,
in the book too.
oh, she does. Okay, for
so.
some reason I couldn't remember that
same
line
spot,
in the book. I just remember her jumping when he
Right.
comes in. But either way, she definitely is not all there. And so with the mayor stalking her, she's like, I'm going to get killed. And she's very nervous. So she decides...
She's probably not wrong either.
Honestly,
I believe it.
I mean, he basically tried to kill her already
Yeah.
with sending her into the Hunger Games.
And it makes sense that he would blame her for his daughter's death. And at that point, all bets are off.
Yeah, absolutely. And so tells Coriolanus that she's going to run away, and so just letting him know, saying goodbye. But because he's paranoid too about his own possibility of survival, he says, "Oh, I'm going to go with you then." So she ends up telling him via her performance of where to meet her by singing the Hanging Tree song, which she wrote earlier in this. I know, crazy.
If you only watched the movies, we were told by somebody who had only seen the movie that it wasn't clear that she wrote the song, and when we saw it, we kind of agreed with that. So if you've only seen the movie, she wrote the song.
Yes, she's not just singing it.
We promise.
She wrote it.
In the book, it's obvious.
Yes.
She wrote it.
And some of you, if you've seen the movie, may have just assumed that.
May have guessed that.
Because I know I saw someone review it on YouTube earlier today, actually.
Who guessed it?
Who was like, "Oh yeah, she wrote the song," and neither of them had read the book all the way through. So,
all right. Just wanted to make it clear.
Yes, I'm sure there's other people who don't pick up on that.
I think it's cool.
I think, yes, it is cool. And it also adds to the haunting aspect of Lucy Gray, which we'll get into in a moment. Oof. I think that's one of the couple parts of the ending that I love is her fate. Okay, so
100%.
Love it. So they decide to meet at midnight by the hanging tree, which is in the song. And so they go and meet up, and then they're going to this cabin in the woods that's by the lake, which Katniss and Gale go to at one point. Katniss's dad shows her.
They meet at dawn because he gets up in the morning and then gets called into the commander's office, and that's when he learns about...
that's right. Thank you for reminding me of that. Okay, back up. They don't meet at midnight. They meet at dawn when Coriolanus actually goes to the officer's tent and is told that he has a position in the officer's school or whatever, the officer's training.
They're going to send him to District 2 to be trained as an officer.
And it's going to be like the next day. Like it's about to happen. So he has this hope, but he still is like, well, they could still find the guns. Basically, that's what he's worried about. The guns have his fingerprints.
So as soon as they find the guns, he's a
then
dead man.
He's out. And so he's like, they're going to find the guns and I won't be able to go to District 2 anyway. Or even if I do, I'm going to be killed there. Like, it won't matter where I go. They're just going to take care of me, basically.
Yeah. But he has this sense, like, it makes it really clear that if the guns weren't out there, he would go. Like, he's only running away with Lucy Gray because that's his only option.
Yes, he feels like they're gonna catch me, so it doesn't matter what happens beyond that.
Yeah. Which I think is super important for understanding the direction his character goes.
Yes, and where he's at right now as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So like I said, fast forwarding again, they end up going to this cabin that Katniss's dad shows her in the Hunger Games. So we've seen this cabin before, and also within this book they had like this little like swim party kind of thing in the lake, and they have gone to this cabin. So he's been there before.
Which is trippy to imagine him hanging out at Katniss's lake and cabin.
Super interesting. Yep. And we talked about how that's probably how he knew to have a camera there to see Katniss's kiss with Gale, and that he mentions later on that he saw in the cabin is because he's actually been there before.
Personally knows about it, which is just mind-blowing to me.
Crazy.
And she never even knows. Part of me wants Katniss to read this book.
Right? Katniss, you need to know the history behind this cabin. You're never going to go there again.
She's too traumatized to appreciate it anyway.
She doesn't deserve that. She doesn't deserve that knowledge that's going to just traumatize her even more. Yeah.
That's a good point.
She may as well just not know.
Never mind, Katniss. You can live in blissful ignorance.
Yes. You have enough trauma to deal with. Anyway, they go inside the cabin, and while they're there, they've actually caught some fish, and they're trying to cook it. Coriolanus notices behind the door, peeking out, is the guns that they had killed those two people with. And so he's like, oh my gosh, they're right here. I could just throw them in the lake and, like, be safe. Like, nobody's gonna get them out of there. Yeah. Nobody's gonna know to look there.
I love the fact that you've connected agency so perfectly with this idea of miracles, because now I'm thinking in terms of, like, this is an awesome, like, miracle for him that, like, opens up possibilities, and he has like this chance to make different decisions based on the fact that these guns that could have been anywhere are literally just right here.
Yeah, he has multiple things he could do.
Yeah.
One of them going with Lucy Gray and just ignoring it.
He could get rid of them.
Yeah.
He could get rid of the guns and leave and have no reason to ever suspect that anybody would come after him or care about him. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep, so he can go with Lucy Gray. He can get rid of them and go back to the Capitol and do things. And he could just, like, let Lucy Gray go.
Yeah.
And have good things and be like, hey, I'm gonna go back to the Capitol. You can go, because he's kind of thinking, like, I already know I freaking hate this. Like, he hates fishing. He hates living in the outdoors. Like, dirt. He's just miserable.
He doesn't know how to do anything.
Yeah, he doesn't know how to do anything. He's just lived in this penthouse lifestyle his whole life, and so he's like, I don't want this.
He doesn't want it.
This is not what he wants. So he could just go quietly back to the Capitol and let Lucy Gray go.
Lucy Gray is his last loose end, but really it's his word against hers. If he gets rid of the guns,
exactly.
Like, who's gonna believe her?
And again, like, she's not necessarily going to say anything about him.
If she says anything.
Yeah, which she most likely won't.
Right.
Like, that's not who she is as a person. Right. She doesn't even like the people in the district.
And she has to get out of
Why
there.
would she tell them? Yeah.
She's in direct danger. She's not going to go back.
Like, even if she does say, oh, it was him, like, again, they're not going to necessarily believe her. And if he throws the guns in the lake, or is like, he could be like, just for my own safety, I can have you go, but I'm going to, like, sneakily put this so you don't even know. That way I just feel more comfortable or whatever. Yeah. So you can't bring the gun back and be like, look, it has his fingerprints on it. Right. Like, I'm sure that's his concern. But if he throws them in the bottom of the lake, what's she's gonna do? Like, she's not gonna swim to the very bottom of the lake and get it. Yeah. Like,
no, he has so many options to, like, he has this peace and comfort from knowing where the evidence is, and he has so many directions he could go with it to change his fate.
And so what he ends up doing is the worst case scenario, because he does choose to go back to the Capitol, but he also chooses to take care of Lucy Gray out of concern for her being a loose end that potentially could get in his way. Yeah, he has a point, but I'm like,
to that. Yes. I don't want to make it sound like he finds the gun and decides to get rid of Lucy Gray. Yes. Like, there's some lead up, and but basically,
yeah. I was gonna say, because I'm like, a lot of it is just like a normal, like, his brain's just going all over the place trying to think, and so it goes down this trail of leading him.
He's getting really like frantic.
It's honestly pretty in the stream of consciousness realm. I think that's what's kind of weird about the end, because the rest of the book isn't necessarily like that, and then all of a sudden we have a couple pages that are like this weird stream of consciousness where we're going. So, like, if you don't like that, like, that's just it. That's what it is, and so it's like going from
and Lucy's actions combine with it for
next,
sure.
Yes,
because Lucy gets suspicious of him and where his mind is going, and so then she starts acting suspicious.
In part, I should say, in part because she's starting to be suspicious about his role in Sejanus's death.
Right.
Because he says that he killed 3 people, and she's like, who is the third person? Like, she knows about Bobby in the arena, or Bobbin. She knows obviously about Mayfield, but she's like, so who's the third person? And he is like, oh, it's my old self. And she's like, not buying that. She's like, that's such a not
stupid. Coriolanus thing
like,
to say.
That is not, what the heck are you talking about? And so she's probably putting things together in her head. Right. In the movie, it makes that a lot more obvious, because she basically says it out loud and is a lot clearer about her suspicion, because even when Sejanus dies, she kind of looks a little bit suspicious of the situation, like, and then that comment makes her even more suspicious. So just to be clear, like, it's partly because of her survivor mode, but also because she's like, oh, if he can kill Sejanus, who I thought was his friend, he could kill me. Basically is where her head goes. So once he finds these guns, she's gonna be like, oh, I'm the loose end. Yes. So
which again they make more clear in the movie.
Yeah. Which Yeah, because in the book it's just a different medium, so you have to convey it a little bit differently too. In the book it's all from his perspective. In the movie it's a movie. So it's a little bit different experience. But she ends up saying that she's going to go gather some swamp potatoes or Katniss. That she's gathering. That was one of the very on the nose moments within the story for sure. But she's going out to harvest some, and then she disappears. He goes out to try to find her and is taking the gun. Is he taking the guns to get rid of them at that point? Or is he just going to look for her?
In the book, he's not taking the guns.
Gonna say,
I think in the movie, he takes the guns and then goes to look for her, maybe?
No, in the movie, it was he was taking the guns and then noticed she's not by the water because that's where the Katniss would have been. So he's like, wait, where is she?
Maybe that's how it happens then in the book. I don't remember.
I can't remember for sure. But basically, he notices that she's not there. And so he starts going
and he takes
out to
a gun to look for her.
Yes.
Which I don't think was intentional at first. It's very much portrayed as like he was holding it and then he walks off to look for her. And then was
just going to look for her. But he does have this thought of, maybe I shouldn't bring this gun. It's going to look very aggressive or intimidating. And so he's like, maybe I should just leave it behind. But then he chooses not to. He keeps it. And so you can tell that like somewhere in his subconscious he probably is thinking more on violence lines. It's just like consciously he's kind of like
and the fact that he even brings that up is like, why are you worried about looking intimidating, my
if
friend?
You have like no, like if you're genuinely innocently going to look for her, then this should be fine. But then his mind is running.
Everybody's suspicious.
Yes, everybody's very suspicious, and his mind's running through. Actually, I will keep this. Where is she? Is she like trying to do something to me? And that's what it kind of becomes. It's
very fast evolvement of thought process.
Yes. And so then it really turns into he's hunting her with this gun.
Which he finally acknowledges. It says something about like the irony. I should be looking at quotes, but he talks about the irony of how quickly their relationship devolved into their own personal Hunger Games. And that's where it's like, that's what we're doing now.
You're like, you are really trying to go kill her. Yeah. Absolutely. So
thankfully it addresses the irony of how quickly it happens. It's like the one thing that I'm like, okay, at least you recognize that this is so random and weird.
This just seems to happen so fast. But I mean, we can see again, I think with Sejanus and the fact that he was willing to do it to him, like at that point he's crossed a line that it's hard for him to come back from.
Which Lucy talks about, right?
Yes, that we all have the natural goodness inside of us, and if we cross that line into evil, we all have that choice basically to do that. So she sees
him as having crossed this line.
Yeah. On Lucy Gray's side though, she does actually put a snake in the way, or at least that's what it looks like to Coriolanus. I feel like in the book it's a little less,
it's more ambiguous.
Clear. It's more ambiguous as to whether or not she actively chose to do that, because she has continued to play with snakes and stuff. Right. And the snake ends up, I can't remember how it happens in the book, but somehow
so it's just the scarf is like on a tree limb or something. He's gifted her his mother's scarf that's bright orange, and it's on a tree limb. And it's the same as the book. He reaches out and grabs it, and the snake just jumps out and bites him. Yeah. But I feel like it's a little more like, it's ambiguous just for the fact that like he's like, oh, this was obviously Lucy Gray, and you're like, you're in the woods, dude. Like,
there are snakes there. And especially later on, I will bring this up now just because it plays in. Okay. Later on, we find out it's not poisonous. Like, he goes to the doctor, and they're like, it wasn't poisonous. So,
like, you were fine.
So, obviously, if she was doing that, it was like, it wasn't going to kill him.
She was just trying to scare him away.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But then in the movie, the way that they frame it, and then the scarf is just in the middle of the ground. And
it's like on the ground, and then the snake's underneath
it. Yeah, it feels very, very planted.
Yes, and then it doesn't say anything about it not being poison.
Right. And he just screams, are you trying to kill me? And then just leaves it at that.
Yeah, so it makes it feel a little more like she was for sure trying to. So, I don't think either is necessarily good or bad, because Lucy Gray definitely has that survivor's instinct. We've seen her use snakes before to do things, so it wouldn't be like beyond the realm of possibility.
Right. The fact that however ambiguous it is, the fact that she disappears and doesn't come back she obviously suspected him and she's in survivor.
Yes.
She's getting
That's
away
where
from
we're
him.
at.
Yeah.
So then after the snake attacks him, he is officially like, we already mentioned he's like going to kill her, but like
dead.
now he's like extra angry. So he goes off and he basically is kind of listening for sounds and starts kind of shooting randomly based on sounds he's hearing. He can't really see her. And then at some point he actually hears a cry in the book. In the film, it actually like shows her distantly in the trees, and then he shoots and then she seems to fall.
She goes down.
It looks like it hurt her, but then when he goes over, there's no one there. She's just gone. And actually in the book, it talks about how she has these footprints that she's left up to the scarf and the snake, and then they disappear. And so she's just gone and he has no idea where, but he starts to hear her voice singing The Hanging Tree through the trees, and then the mocking jays are picking it up and singing it over and over again, which is just increasing his hatred for them and is really psychologically impacting him with these mocking jays. And so he starts just shooting in circles, shooting at the mocking jays, shooting at the trees all over. In the film, it kind of narrows down this scene a little bit where he's mostly just shooting at the mocking jays after Lucy Gray has left, and he's hearing the song everywhere, which is just amazing because of the thought of how much that song probably terrified him later when people were singing it. Like the fact that of all the songs Katniss could have chose to sing, and she ends up singing that just kind of off the propo, that she like off the cuff just decides to sing that one. I'm like, oh, it's so good. Like there's just the ghost of Lucy Gray everywhere for Snow at that point, especially like within District 12, but in Katniss herself, even though they're very different people, there's just enough similarities that it's just like a haunting, really. It's a very, instead of just being like, oh, it's like reincarnated, which would be one thing, but it's like a haunting, which I love it so much. The best part about the ending of this book is Lucy Gray, and she's just gone. He doesn't find her.
Which all of this casts back to a poem.
Yes, I was gonna say that. I think that's also another one that makes it even better. Let me see if I can find it and at least quote the last part of that.
I just pulled up the poem. They say, I haven't compared it. They say in the book that they changed some of the words. So the original Wordsworth poem says, or the last stanza, or rough and smooth she trips along and never looks behind and sings a solitary song that whistles in the wind.
Yes, and that's how it is in the book too.
So the idea, basically, that Lucy Gray has gotten her name from this poem by William Wordsworth, just titled Lucy Gray, and it says that she has these tracks in the snow that lead to a bridge, and then they stop at the bridge and then disappear, and that's just kind of it. And then that last stanza where she sings a solitary song that whistles in the wind. So Lucy Gray's ending in the book, very much a callback to her ballad that she was named after.
So there was that, and she just kind of disappears. Literally, the
tracks are gone.
Footprints and everything. She's just gone. And then I love that it's a solitary song that whistles in the wind. And that's like, as she's running away and singing, and then the mocking jays are all singing too. Yeah. So it's kind of like it's echoing throughout the forest on the wind. And then 65 years later, we have Katniss sing it. And it's like Lucy Gray is still singing and haunting Coriolanus Snow. And I love it so much. It's like Wuthering Heights crap. So great.
Yeah. And I guess that's made even better, too, by the conversation they have about it. Because he doesn't, Coriolanus doesn't understand it, but he's hanging out with the Covey at one point, and they have this discussion about it. And a little girl in the Covey named Maud Ivory is they're talking about, like, is she a ghost? Did she actually die? Where's the body? All of this stuff. And so there's this question of, like, is she alive? Is she dead? Is she a ghost that can continue to haunt? And so then it almost answers the question for him in a way of she didn't, like, I don't know, of where's the body. I don't know. It doesn't answer the question, but it does. Like, she became a ghost and now she's here haunting.
Haunting him.
It's awesome. It's too awesome for words.
Right. We love some good literary stuff. Way to go,
yes.
Suzanne Collins.
Especially when it gives Wuthering Heights vibes.
Yes. Seriously, a lot of the scene, I'm like, that might be one of the, like, saving graces about it. I already said, like, Lucy Gray and her outcome is my favorite part of the ending.
So
and part of it
cool.
is the Wuthering Heights vibes that go on in that. Love it.
And the pure mystery of it too, you don't get to know. I'm
Yes.
so grateful we don't
I know.
include that in your short story collection.
Yes, I do not want to know what happens to
Never
Lucy
tell
Gray.
us what happens to Lucy Gray. It'll ruin the whole thing.
Yes, because that's part of why it's so great that she's haunting him through Katniss.
Yes.
Love it so much. I'm like, I never want that. Although I feel like she probably wrote it that way because she doesn't want to change it that way.
I'm
sure she would never.
I'm sure we're not in danger.
Ever.
But just
do
in
that.
case.
Yes, please don't.
Gotta throw out the,
I don't wanna know.
request. Don't want to know.
Yep. So this is the point where all of these miracles have led him to this opportunity and he chose the wrong way. And from then on, he continues to choose the wrong direction. Yeah. He never backtracks.
Now we've really crossed the line.
Of course, we have 65 years of time that I'm sure more opportunities came because that's how God works.
God gives us chances.
He just
innumerable.
never steps aside and allows God to take over. He just keeps going with his ambition and arrogance and selfishness and his own beliefs about the world, forcing them on other people.
And his really his desire for survival and comfort too.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's something that we haven't really talked about. He loves luxury and comfort.
Yes.
And he spent so long without that I think that's really a driving factor for him in seeking power and wealth and recognition.
Yeah, he wants to be in control because he spent so long without control. And part of that control is having nice things, having what he wants.
Eating whenever he wants and whatever he wants. Just
no chaos.
Growing all of the roses. I love that he continues his grandmother's rose garden and has as many roses as he could ever want.
Yeah. And it was so creepy actually in this book too, where there's a couple times people tell him he smells like roses. And I was like, in this scene, it's like seen as like this sweet, nice thing. And then to Katniss in many years, it's like disgusting. Like she hates it. And it's like interesting that through our agency, as we choose certain things and choose to ignore the miracles, it can lead us to turn those miracles into something vile if we're not treating them correctly. And that, I think, with the roses, it's taking something that's beautiful and wonderful and a special thing and turns it into something disgusting and terrifying. So we'll just get through the epilogue of where Snow ends up by the end of this book. And it's definitely on his way to becoming the person he is in the Hunger Games trilogy. So he ends up going back to District 12 and he agrees to go to the officer training camp. But as he's on the train, it ends up stopping at the Capitol. And he's like, what are we doing here? I was supposed to go to 2. And they're like, change of plan. We've been asked to bring you here. And while he's there, he meets up with Dr. Gall. And Dr. Gall basically explains, like, I thought your time in the districts was well worth your time and that you learned a lot based on your letter and on the Jabberjay you sent me, letting me know about Sejanus and the rebels' plan. So thank you for that. And it's interesting because she asks, once again, earlier in the book, she asked, what are the Hunger Games for? And he kind of gave the stock answer of to punish the districts. And she's like, okay, now I'm going to ask you again, what are the Hunger Games for? And he's like, I would say it's still to punish the districts, but it's also to remind us of who we naturally are as evil beings who just want to create violence and chaos. And the Capitol is the only power there is that can control that chaos. And it's a reminder of that fact in life, which Dr. Gall loves. That's the answer she wanted the whole time.
There's also the everlasting war factor, which I think is I don't think they mentioned that in the movie, really. No, but in the book, really. She believes that the war never really ends. Like, there are always going to be rebels fighting the Capitol. And, like, this is never going to go away. And they can't control that eternal war. But the Hunger Games is a war that they can put in the palm of their hands and control. So it's kind of a way of, like, controlling the whole war, by showing everybody that they can control this part of it.
Yes.
That's probably not the best way to explain it, but
no. But I think that was a good way to say it. I think
you
worded it pretty well. It's all about control.
It's all about
what
control.
they want. That's what both of them want.
Yes.
They don't want the chaos that comes from outright war, which is a good thing, like that they don't want that part.
We don't all
But
of us
then they
war.
just think that they need to manipulate how it happens instead of trying to get rid of it.
Yeah.
They don't believe it can be gotten rid of.
And there is definitely something that I feel like isn't addressed head on. I mean, like it's there, but then nobody like says it, is just the really strong prejudice, which I thought was really interesting. Like they talk about like to punish the districts, and they talk about control and not letting humanity get out of control. But honestly, like it all really just kind of comes down to racism.
Yeah.
Like they genuinely see the districts as lesser, and they think that they're better, and therefore the districts should be put in their place and just contribute to the capital. And it really is just kind of a pure, simple prejudice that I feel like they try to hide behind this mask of protecting people when really... and protecting themselves. I mean, they're not trying to pretend like they're not trying to protect themselves, but it's this mask of protection and control when really they just hate district people simply for the fact that they're district and they see them as more savage.
And the district started the war in their eyes. So they're like, well,
So it just adds to it.
yeah, you clearly are the violent ones. You're clearly the awful ones.
Right.
Which is so interesting when you put Coriolanus in the games, and he so instinctively is one of the ones who go straight into killing.
Right.
Like, it's interesting that they have this idea of the districts when, like, Coriolanus was the one who was most like that.
No, it almost feels, it's kind of this glaring thing, and I'm fine with it not being addressed. I don't want this to come across as a bad thing.
Yeah,
but
I
it's
definitely
like
think
this,
it's something that is put out there, but like Suzanne calls
for us
just
to understand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's really fascinating that there's like this glaring lesson of you are all the same that he never even considers.
Yes. He, for some reason, the capital he sees as better and bigger and powerful enough.
Yeah. It's just this ingrained prejudice and because he even talks about we tend to blame the war too, which I think is definitely part of it. I think the war reinforced their idea of the savagery, but he talks about his district hating father, and in a way that makes it sound like it goes back further. Like
Before
I think
the
there's
war,
this long term.
I mean, clearly the
deep-seated...
districts rebelled for some reason. They were clearly probably
yeah.
not being treated very well beforehand
right.
either.
Yeah. So yeah, there's obviously this ingrained prejudice, which I think is just not related to the conversation we're having, but just like a really fascinating like lesson that's out there, but not actually part of the story, but is actually kind of the underlying problem that actually needs to be fixed.
Ranking people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Because then it flips in the Hunger Games. That's what President Coin, she wants to create a Hunger Games with the capital children, because now the districts see the capital as these violent, evil, savage people.
Yes.
And so it's just going to become this
swap
flipped
it around.
problem. Yeah.
After this conversation, Dr. Gall does say, okay, Coriolanus, you're getting let back into the university. You'll be taken care of. The Plinths are going to take care of you.
Thanks to Janus's friendship.
Yes, Sejanus's friendship has made it so Sejanus's parents want to take Coriolanus on as a surrogate son, basically.
And heir.
An heir, yep. He is now the heir to their fortune, and they're going to take care of him, get him through university, and get them their house back and everything. Like, it's all going great because of this sacrifice on Sejanus's part, where Coriolanus basically caused him to die. So there we are. So we get all of this information at the beginning of the epilogue. There's a few paragraphs just kind of explaining a lot of these things going on, but then we have him have a conversation with Dean Highbottom, and it's at this point that we understand why Dean Highbottom hates him so much, which we've addressed a little bit already. But basically, when Dean Highbottom and Coriolanus's father Crassus were in school together, they received an assignment from Dr. Gall, and she asked them to basically come up with like like the worst, like the best, most extreme way to punish your enemy.
So that they can never forget
what
so they've done wrong.
Exactly. And so that's what the Hunger Games came out of. He says, I was drunk and your father used that and got me to come up with this idea. And we wrote it up, and I wanted to get rid of it. I wanted to destroy it. I didn't want it to be anywhere near anybody, especially Dr. Gall, because I'm sure her being his teacher, he could tell that she was nuts. But Crassus, while Dean Highbottom was out, he ends up taking this proposal to Dr. Gall, and that's what created the Hunger Games. And so Dean Highbottom is living with all this blood on his hands, basically, because of this. At least that's how he feels. I would argue that if he wanted to destroy it, then he shouldn't feel guilty about it. If it was someone else who put it in a position to actually be used. Right. It's one thing to write something down and be like, oh, but I don't want anybody to see this. Right. And it's another thing to actively do something about it.
Maybe it's a mini lesson on how the word of wisdom helps us. Like,
yes, that is a good point. Because there is
the fact that he came up with it and wrote it down, and like he did participate in it, and we can say it wasn't his choice, but like, it's always your choice.
Yes. I mean,
but I agree. Like, ultimately, I agree with you. He did not have any intention of using it and turning it in. And therefore, I can understand why he feels guilty. Yeah. For sure. But he doesn't
necessarily need to.
He doesn't need to. I wouldn't blame him for I would encourage him to alleviate some of that guilt from himself. Yes. For sure.
But that is why he's addicted to morphling. And that's why he drowns himself on that and has a really bitter attitude, because then from then on, not only is this happening and he feels like it's all his fault, but also everybody's constantly like, he's the creator of the games, so
he gets everybody so much praise
knows for it. And he's like, I didn't want to do this in the first place. It was Coriolanus's father who wanted to do it in the first place.
He says that he wanted the grade. Like, I don't even know if Coriolanus's father, necessarily cared. He was like, I want the grade for turning it in. And he just wrote it. This is
great. But I'm sure he knew. I'm sure they had both talked about Dr. Gall and how great she was. Like, I'm sure Dean Highbottom is angry at Crassus because Crassus knew that Dr. Gall might use it.
That there was a
very strong chance that she would use it. And that's why he knew he would get a good grade, was because she would find it useful. So anyway, all of that to say, that's why he's hated Coriolanus, because of that, and also because he sees similar personality traits in Coriolanus that is causing the games that he's trying to get rid of to continue.
Yeah. Coriolanus does the same thing even. Dr. Gall says turn in an assignment to improve the games, and Coriolanus says I need the grade.
He'll do it, and not only that, he'll do it when one of his best friends just got murdered because of this whole thing. Yes, he had an opportunity to break away from it and he didn't, and so that's what Dean Highbottom is like, okay, that's a problem. And so anyway, so Coriolanus hears this and they have this conversation, and then Coriolanus was like, oh, well, I was really just bringing this diploma over because I assume you don't want a diploma from the academy just floating around out there where anybody could see it, especially one that was given to a traitor.
Yeah, it's Sejanus's diploma.
It's Sejanus's. And so Dean Highbottom takes it, and then somehow Coriolanus gets him. I can't remember in the book how he does the morphling stuff.
It's just in his personal Sejanus's personal effects box, and he has the he doesn't dump it like in the movie, but he throws the morphling bottles in the garbage in Dean Highbottom's trash. Okay,
gotcha.
Knowing that he'll take them out.
Knowing that he'll take it. So for those watching on YouTube, just a brief tangent, my phone that I used to record the video on died. So we're just going to have the audio for the rest of this episode since we're nearly done. I apologize for that. Hopefully that will never happen again, but that was me being remiss and thinking that we would get this done faster than we did. So let's just wrap this up. So anyway, yes, in the book, the morphling is thrown in the trash. Coriolanus, knowing that Dean Highbottom will pick it out of the trash and take it, which he had from Sejanus's stuff. Sejanus had it from his own injury at some point. He had morphling in his case, so that's why he had it and then threw it away out of Sejanus's things. In the film, he just dumps it on the table and then like knows that Dean Highbottom's just gonna take it. But either way, comes to the same conclusion. Dean Highbottom takes it, and Coriolanus had used his classic rat poisoning trick that he had learned from Lucy Gray and ends up putting rat poison in the morphling and then kills Dean Highbottom. It was, and I love the way it actually shares it in the book because it's just like this casual conversation and he leaves. And in the movie, it just like shows Dean Highbottom die and you're like, okay, yeah, like, okay, he killed him probably. In the book, it's just like this random one of the last couple paragraphs. He's like, it was really easy to get rat poison. It's like how he says it and then talks vaguely about putting it in the morphling bottle, but it doesn't say anything about like him like saying I killed Dean Highbottom. It's not very direct at all, which I just love when
it's super awesome.
They do that. Yeah, it's really well done.
Casual conversation and then, oh yeah, also I got rat poison.
Yep. That's what you need to know. I got some rat poison. And that's his first official, like, poisoning kill on purpose.
Non-self-defense.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's turning into the President Snow we know and love to hate. Yep.
Yeah. One thing that actually stood out to me, too, before that, is it mentions that and this was something that took me a minute to come to terms with, he mentions intercepting. He had sent money back home to Tigris, and he intercepts it and pockets the money for himself.
Oh,
and that
I didn't pick up on that, but that's interesting.
That was so hard for me because I was like, excuse me,
yes.
Like you and Tigris have been BFFs. Like it's like his one soft spot in the world is Tigris, and then obviously as Lucy Gray, but like Tigris is the one who they actually like pool resources, who he sacrifices for. They work together, and for him to intercept money going to her for him to use, I was like, that almost feels worse to me, actually, because Dean Highbottom is just getting revenge on like that. He's killed before. Now he's like kind of gone down this path. This guy has been a pain in his neck, even beyond that, literally actively tried to destroy his future. But with Tigris, for him, just that action kind of against her for himself, I'm like, whoa, okay, that's kind of
very
crazy.
Much changed. Yeah. Absolutely. That's a really good point, especially just because we see what happens to their relationship later on. Yeah. So we had to get some hint at it souring beyond just him changing.
That he does something.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a good point. It is better to have a hint that like he would take an action against her. Because like I said, it took me a minute to come to terms with it. But obviously in the Hunger Games, we see that something has gone wrong.
Yes. And so it makes sense to kind of show that it's starting to. And I'm sure in his head there's a sense of like, well, I know that we're going to probably be taken care of now. Right. And I'll still be able to take care of her. It's fine. She doesn't necessarily need this.
Right. Yeah, he can justify it super easy.
Yes.
But it's still
a jab at her and dismissing her in a way he's never done before.
Comfort and face.
Yes. And that's where we end it. So he had all of these miracles and he even sought them out, but he wasn't seeking them out with an honest heart or a grateful heart. Yeah. And that just impacts so much.
And I think part of that maybe comes from the not expecting them. We haven't talked about that. On the first page, it says he doesn't expect miracles. And I think he seeks out miracles, but we did talk about how he like doesn't classify them as such. And I think maybe that's he doesn't expect things to just happen. He sees it as I have to make things happen. And so when something happens, it's because of me, because he doesn't expect anything to come from anybody else. So he has like part of the equation, but not the whole thing.
I do want to, as usual, end with a specific quote, scripture. This one again comes from that talk by Elder Uchtdorf from this last General Conference back in October. Towards the end of his talk, he says, "Our path will not be free from grief, sorrow, or sadness, but we came this far by the word of Christ with unshaken faith in him, relying wholly upon the merits of him who is mighty to save. And together we will press forward with a steadfastness in Christ, having a perfect brightness of hope and a love of God and of all people." And really, the eternal truth is that all of these miracles are made possible because of Jesus Christ. And even though there is a lot of negative things, this book explores all sorts of negative things about humanity and about our experiences in life. But because of Christ, because we keep moving forward in steadfastness and keep trusting in his merits, which allow for these miracles in our lives, and we take these miracles and utilize them the way God intended us to utilize them, that is what will save us in the end. And that will bring us the joy that we all seek in this life and in the life to come. Okay, so we'll wrap up there. Again, sorry if you were on YouTube and you didn't get the last little bit of our video, but hopefully you enjoyed at least hearing our thoughts on the rest of this. If you are watching on YouTube or listening to our podcast anywhere, please be sure to subscribe, also to leave a like or a review depending on where you're listening slash watching. Also follow us on Instagram at God in All Things Podcast. We do all sorts of updates there, and we have some fun stories when we remember to do them. Like we did a little story about our trip watching Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Also, if you're interested in what I'm reading, please check me out on the channel Good Strong Words on YouTube. I just chat about my general thoughts on the books I'm reading. Sometimes Cariana shows up.
Those are the best episodes.
Yes, really. Basically the Shakespeare Festival, and then every once in a while I'll just talk about her because,
just watch those. You should have a little Cariana playlist.
I should.
So that people
that
can
would be
just
so
watch
cute.
The
Yep. I know. I should. I really should. Anyway, definitely check us out on there. We hope you are having a wonderful, wonderful day, a wonderful week. Keep remembering to see God in all things, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.